Hey guys, we're going to continue with our discussion on aquatic biodiversity. We're going to start looking at lentic systems. Specifically, we're looking at wetlands today. Wetlands are defined as the transitional land between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. These areas of land are covered by shallow water for at least part of the year. I know that doesn't really seem like a controversial definition, but believe me, it is. People have haggled over that definition for quite some time. Developers look for perhaps a more narrow definition, while environmental scientists or environmentalists are looking for a more broad definition so that more areas can be protected. Nevertheless, what defines a wetland are three specific characteristics. First, the hydrology. That's basically, of course, the study of water, but specifically it's going to look at the timing and the extent of flooding or soil saturation. Remember, wetlands don't have to be submerged or covered in water all the time. So we can use other characteristics that help us define a wetland. Soils, for example. The soils of wetlands have unique characteristics. First of all, they're waterlogged, supersaturated, meaning they are anaerobic, no oxygen is present, and they're also rich in organic material, as these are oftentimes very productive systems with lots of plant life. The third characteristic are the vegetation and the vegetation types. These vegetations are considered hydrophytes. These are plants that love water. Some of them are submerged, others are emergent, and some are floating. All of these vegetation types have unique adaptations and structures that allow them to deal with supersaturated soils. It turns out we define or classify wetlands based on the vegetation present. For example, freshwater wetlands, we have marshes, those that are dominated by reeds, rushes, and sedges, or grassy type vegetation. Swamps, these are wetlands covered by trees. These trees have very interesting adaptations, like these buttress-shaped trunks. These trunks provide them with structural support in the supersaturated soils, and they also prop up the roots so they can access oxygen when the soils are completely submerged. Additional wetlands that are freshwater include, of course, bogs. These are vertically growing mosses growing in wetlands. Floodplains, these are land areas adjacent to rivers that flood. And prairie potholes are depressions that were created from our last glaciation. We also have coastal wetlands, saltwater. So in addition to being adapted to saturated soils, these plants also have to be adapted to high salinity conditions or high salt content. We have both mangrove forests and salt marshes. These are dependent upon latitude. Mangroves are typically found in the tropics, nutrient-rich coastal zones that often have rapid nutrient cycles due to tidal flows. These places are dominated by 69 different tree species that can grow in salt water. Notice their extensive root systems that extend above the water surface. These knead roots allow them to obtain oxygen during high water levels. They're also pretty intricate and provide nice nooks and crannies for juvenile fish to get away from the open ocean and seek a hiding spot or a refuge and avoid predation. These coastal mangroves are really important because we know the tropics often have high intensity storms like hurricanes, and these mangroves help to buffer and reduce the impact of these storms and protect the coast from erosion. The more temperate analog to mangrove forests include salt marshes. Salt marshes, of course, are found in our temperate locations, our mid-latitudes, and contain salt-tolerant grasses. They also are very important critical nurseries for habitat for juvenile fish and very important in terms of their storm buffering capacity. Third type of aquatic biome that I want to discuss today that's a type of wetland are what we call estuaries. Estuaries are a coastal body of water, partly surrounded by land with access to the open ocean and a large supply of fresh water. In other words, it's where rivers meet the sea. These turn out to be some of the most productive aquatic ecosystems on planet Earth. They're productive for a variety of reasons. They're relatively shallow, so sunlight can penetrate to initiate photosynthesis. They're adjacent to land, and so runoff from the land can deliver nutrients that stimulate the productivity. Them being shallow also increase the temperatures and warm the water, and warmer waters stimulate productivity. And of course, because they are governed by tidal fluctuations, those nutrients should constantly move through and facilitate biogeochemical cycling. It's a tough place to live. Despite the fact that they are incredibly productive, organisms that live in estuaries have to have an incredible range of tolerance. That's because these are very or highly variable environments. There are daily and seasonal variations in salinity or salt content and temperature. The primary reason for these variabilities has to do with the tides. Of course, it's the gravitational pull of the moon and to a lesser extent the sun that creates 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day. During high tides, salt water from the ocean moves into the estuary and raises the salinity. During low tides, fresh water tends to dominate as the salt water recedes back into the sea. Furthermore, seasonal variations in snowmelt and storm patterns can increase saltwater or decrease saltwater. For example, a rainstorm would make it less saline, whereas a hurricane originating from the ocean would penetrate into the estuary and raise the salinity. There's going to be seasonal temperature changes. Certainly the turbidity or the amount of sediment in the water coming from runoff will also influence the temperature. And when water's evaporating, that means typically it gets more salty because when water evaporates, the salt doesn't go anywhere and the concentration of salt would increase. So to live here, you'd have to be capable of dealing with these huge swings in both temperature and salinity, not only on a seasonal basis, but on a daily basis. That's it. Next, we're going to be looking at the ecological functions and human activities that are leading to their destruction.